What if I told you that I just filmed this entire video and forgot to turn on my microphone? It might have happened. Let's do our 10-minute Bible study now and talk about Psalm 46. You can get the PDF that has all the information on it on our website at tobelikechrist.com, and I should be good and ready and prepared to do this study because I literally just did it to this camera without any sound. Okay, author of Psalm 46. It is, again, the sons of Korah. This was a family from the tribe of Levi. Levi was one of the families of the 12 tribes of Israel. I am not aware of any New Testament references back to Psalm 46. We do have some themes to talk about. Number one, God is a fortress from outside dangers. Number two, no calamity, not even the destruction of the earth, is worth fearing if you are in the protection of God. And then number three is a direct quote from the text that's very famous, and you've probably heard it before. Quote, "Be still and know that I am God." That comes from Psalm 46. Now, one definition, and that's the word Selah. And I want to mention here that if you've been studying with us for weeks now and you've been studying the Psalms, a lot of these definitions are redundant, and I'm sorry about that. The reason that I do that is because I want it to be so that somebody can come in on any Psalm and have the information that they need. So that's why I have the definition sometimes again and again and again. We've seen this a couple times. It appears a couple times in this psalm. The word Selah is a word that is somewhat of a mystery. Historians have been trying to figure out what it means for generations, and no one knows exactly. I think the leading theories are probably that it's like a musical marker, or that it marks a pause in the psalm where people were supposed to stop and to pause and to meditate on what had just been said. Before we get into our outline, I'll say that I think this is one of my favorite Psalms that we've done so far. It's really beautiful. It talks about the protection of God and how if you're in God's protection, there's literally nothing on earth to fear. And I think it's something that we probably all need to apply more into our lives. Just this idea of reminding ourselves again and again and again. There's nothing to be anxious about. There's nothing to fear. Nothing to worry about if you're on God's side. He can take care of literally anything. So that's what this one's about. I've got it broken down into 3 sections, even though we've only got 11 verses. The first section, God is a refuge when the earth falls apart. This psalm is a psalm of worship in which the author praises God for being a refuge to people when the chaos of the world is swirling around them. He began with these words, quote, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." Maybe you've heard those words. Those get quoted quite a bit. That's verse 1. The psalmist's confidence in God was very resilient, even against some of the world's worst calamities. He writes that it didn't matter if the earth was torn out from beneath his feet, if the mountains shook due to earthquakes, or he was barreled over by floodwaters that came rushing by. He knew that God could get him through anything. And, obviously, I don't think he was anticipating any of those things necessarily. But what he's saying is, let the world throw its worst at me. If I'm with God, doesn't matter. So that takes us to section number 2, verses 4 through 7, the safety of the city of God. So in contrast to these destructive floodwaters that figuratively were threatening people, these that he just talked about that were threatening to barrel him over, the author spoke of a safe city, a glad city that was fed by a river, not a rushing, raging river, but seemingly a peaceful river. This was the city of God, which I think in context of knowing who the author is, knowing which nation the author was from, what he's talking about here is the city of Jerusalem. God's presence was in Jerusalem, and he mentions that. And so if God's presence was there, they were safe there as long as the people respected God. So this city was protected from outside calamities because it was the place of God's presence, of God's temple, the place where the true God of heaven was worshipped. The psalmist writes, quote, "God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns," in verse 5. So God preserved the city of Jerusalem. It was preserved because God determined to preserve it. It was by his power that it was preserved, that it was protected from the downfall that other nations experienced, at least for a period of time while God's people were faithful. But at the time when the psalmist is writing, the city is protected, and he knows that's thanks to God. It's not necessarily thanks to their great military prowess or anything like that. In contrast to the protection that Jerusalem received, if God was determined to destroy a nation, it did not matter how hard that nation fought against him. With just a word, the text says that he could melt that nation from off the face of the earth. And then finally, verses 8 through 11, the famous words, "Be still and know that I am God." The psalmist invited people to think about the incredible acts of God and how he works to govern the world. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth, the psalmist writes. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Basically, what he's saying is it's God who determines the outcome of battles and wars and which nations succeed and which nations fall and are humbled. The psalmist encourages his listeners, and he also encourages us in the modern day to ponder the fact that God is God and we are not. Right? Be still. Stop worrying. Stop thinking that everything is up to you. Stop thinking that you're in control of, more than you're actually in control of. Be still and recognize the fact that God is on the throne. God is in control, and he will ensure that his name is exalted on the earth. That's part of what he's doing in all of his work on the earth, to show that his name is glorious, that he's to be worshipped. And now just a short application today. A person can plot and plan and spend anxious hours in preparation, but if God is not on their side, their effort and their work is going to come to nothing. It's better to be still, to trust in God in quiet contentment, and to affix your will to his, because he's the best guide and he's the best protector. Be still and know that I am God. That quote reminds me, I think, of the New Testament. It's not used in quite the same way, but when the apostles are on the Sea of Galilee and there's a storm, they're looking around, they think they're going to drown. There's all these reasons to be anxious and worried and to think that everything's going wrong. And Jesus stands up and, not speaking to the apostles, but speaking to the sea, he says, "Be still." And all of the apostles' problems are taken away. It's that easy for God to deal with our problems. So rest in him rather than busying yourself with being anxious and worried all the time.